A few days before Freddie Mercury died, he woke up at 6 in the morning and said he wanted to look at his paintings. Jim Hutton was there. He offered to carry Freddie downstairs. Freddie said no. He made his own way, holding the banister. Jim Hutton walked in front of him, one step ahead, ready to catch him if he fell. At the bottom of the stairs, Hutton brought a chair to the doorway of the room where the collection was kept. He sat Freddie in it. He turned on the spotlights, the specific lighting that Freddie Mercury had installed to illuminate the paintings. Each work individually lit, the colors and the surfaces the way he had always wanted them to be seen. Freddie Mercury sat in the chair and looked at his collection. The paintings he had spent a lifetime gathering. The objects he had chosen, one by one, from auction houses and galleries and dealers across 20 years. The things that, beyond the music and the performances and the extraordinary public life, had been the private center of what he cared about most. He looked at them in the early morning silence of Garden Lodge, and he said, "Oh, they're wonderful." Those were his last real words. A few days later, in the early morning of the 24th of November, 1991, Jim Hutton stopped a carriage clock Freddie had given him. The time was 12 minutes to 7. Freddie Mercury's passion for art is one of the least discussed aspects of his life, and one of the most significant in understanding who he was when not on stage. The public Freddie Mercury was the person the world knew. The private Freddie Mercury went to auction houses on quiet mornings, spent serious money on Japanese woodblock prints and paintings, studied what he bought with genuine scholarly interest, and built a collection that reflected his eye with the same seriousness he brought to music. His interest had begun at Ealing College of Art, where he studied graphic design and developed a visual sensibility that never left him. The collection at Garden Lodge was not conspicuous consumption. It was a collection built by someone who looked at things carefully and chose them for what he saw in them. Art was the thing that belonged entirely to him and could not be shared with 70,000 people in a stadium. Garden Lodge at 1 Logan Place in Kensington was Freddie Mercury's home from 1980 until his death in 1991. The house, a substantial Georgian property behind a high wall in a quiet street in West London, was, by every account of the people who knew it, a reflection of Freddie Mercury's taste in its most developed and personal form. He spent years on it, overseeing the decoration, choosing the furnishings, determining the specific quality of light and arrangement that made the house what he wanted it to be. The art collection was distributed through the house paintings in the major rooms, objects and prints in the corridors. The specific accumulation of a person who does not stop at having enough, but continues until the collection is complete, in the way only they can judge. The room where the paintings were most concentrated, the room Jim Hutton lit with the spotlights in the early morning of those last few days, was not a gallery in the formal sense. It was a room where Freddie Mercury had hung the things he most wanted to look at. The spotlights were not decorative. They were specific, each trained on a specific work, each calibrated to bring out the qualities Freddie had seen when he chose it. He had designed the light for the paintings. He had built the room around what he wanted to see. He had designed the light for the paintings. He had chosen where each one hung. He had built the room around the experience of looking at them. And a few days before he died, at 6 in the morning, he made his own way down the stairs holding the banister, Jim Hutton one step ahead to sit in a chair in the doorway and see them one last time. He did not ask to hear music. He did not ask for a familiar voice or a memory or a conversation. He asked to see the paintings. And when the spotlights came on and the colors and surfaces of 20 years of looking and choosing were lit in front of him, he said the only thing there was to say. Jim Hutton was born in County Carlow in Ireland in 1949 and was working as a hairdresser at the Savoy Hotel in London when he met Freddie Mercury in 1985. He did not know who Freddie Mercury was. He turned Freddie down for a drink the first time they met. He had a partner. When they met again a year and a half later, the circumstances were different. The relationship lasted until Freddie's death in 1991, 6 years at Garden Lodge, wearing matching wedding rings, the person closest to Freddie in his private daily life. When Freddie told Jim about the diagnosis in 1987 and said he would understand if Jim wanted to leave, Jim said, "Don't be stupid, I'm not going anywhere." He was there at 6 in the morning when Freddie wanted to see the paintings. He was there at 12 minutes to 7 on the 24th of November. He stopped the clock. The art collection Freddie Mercury had assembled at Garden Lodge represented 20 years of serious engagement with visual art. Japanese woodblock prints, the ukiyo-e tradition he had first encountered through his studies at Ealing, collected with a consistency that dealers described as expert. British and European paintings, chosen for how they looked rather than who made them, with the direct judgment of someone who trusted his eye over market reputation. Decorative arts, ceramics, glass, objects whose quality was in their surfaces and forms. The collection was not comprehensive in any academic sense. It was personal. Every piece had been chosen by him. Every piece had passed the specific test of his attention. He had looked at it, kept looking, and decided the looking was worth continuing. November 1991 at Garden Lodge had the quality that everyone who was present has described: concentrated, careful, steadily narrowing. Freddie Mercury had decided in October to stop his medication, the decision of a man who had assessed the situation and determined that the time for fighting had passed. The household was Freddie Mercury, Jim Hutton, Peter Freestone, and Joe Finelli, the small circle who now shared the quiet work of presence. Being there, managing what could be managed and being with what could not. Visitors came: Brian May, Roger Taylor, Elton John. The house was as it had always been. The paintings were on the walls where they had always been. Freddie Mercury moved through the house on the days he could move. He did not complain, or not in the way most people would have, because complaint was not the instrument he had for this. He did not complain. Peter Freestone and Jim Hutton have both said this in different words at different times, but meaning the same thing. He was in serious pain. He was frightened in the ways that anyone is frightened when they are dying. He had bad days and worse days. He had days when he did not leave his room, and he did not make what was happening the subject of the household, did not perform the suffering, did not require the people around him to manage his distress in addition to everything else they were managing. He received what was given. He gave what he could. And a few days before the end, at 6 in the morning, he gave Jim Hutton one more thing to carry: the memory of a man in a chair, spotlights on, looking at his paintings, saying they were wonderful. Jim Hutton has described the morning of the paintings with a precision that suggests he has replayed it many times across the years since, keeping each detail exactly as it happened. The time, 6 in the morning. The request, Freddie saying he wanted to look at his paintings. The offer, Jim saying he would carry him downstairs. The refusal, Freddie saying no. The descent, Freddie making his own way, holding the banister, one step at a time. Jim Hutton walking in front of him, ready. The chair brought to the doorway. The spotlights turned on. The looking, the sentence. The specific quality of the refusal, the no to being carried, is the detail that stays. At the end of his life, in serious physical difficulty, Freddie Mercury made his own way down the stairs to see the paintings. He could have been carried. He chose not to be. The body was failing. The will to make it to the paintings under his own power was not. Oh, they're wonderful. 3 words, said at 6 in the morning in a chair by a man looking at paintings he had chosen over 20 years. Not a formal statement, not the response of a collector cataloging qualities. The response of someone who has arrived at something they love and found it still there, still itself. The paintings had always been wonderful. That is why he had chosen them. But at 6 in the morning, a few days before he died, when the spotlights came on and the room was lit the way he had designed it to be lit, in that specific moment, looking at them one last time, he said the true thing. They were wonderful. It was enough. The household at Garden Lodge in the final weeks included Mary Austin, who had been Freddie Mercury's first great love in the early 1970s, and who had remained across 20 years of different relationships in different phases of his life. The person he trusted most completely. He had given her the house in his will. He had given her half his fortune. He had called her his common-law wife and meant it in the specific way that someone means a word when it describes the most important relationship they have had. In the final weeks, according to Jim Hutton, Mary Austin suggested at one point that Freddie remove the wedding ring he wore, the platinum band that matched Jim Hutton's, the symbol of the commitment the two men had made to each other in the absence of any legal form for it. She suggested it might cause discomfort if his hand swelled. Hutton has described this moment with the specific restraint of someone who understood what was being suggested beneath the practical concern. The ring stayed on. It was on Freddie Mercury's hand when he died. The ring stayed on. The paintings were on the walls where they had always been. The spotlights were calibrated to the light he had wanted for them. At 6 in the morning, he made his own way down the stairs and sat in a chair and looked at them and said they were wonderful. Everything Freddie Mercury had built in private, the house, the collection, the relationship, the specific quality of a life lived on his own terms in the spaces the world could not see, was intact. He left it intact. Oh, they're wonderful. 3 words. Everything. The 24th of November, 1991 was a Sunday. Freddie Mercury died at 12 minutes to 7 in the morning, bronchial pneumonia. The AIDS-related complications, the underlying condition. Jim Hutton described the final moments with the honesty of someone who has decided to tell the truth without managing how the telling makes him appear. Freddie had been given morphine. He had wet himself in the night. Jim Hutton and another member of the household changed him quietly, without waking him, because if he had woken and seen what happened, said Hutton, there would have been hell to pay. That was the specific quality of care Jim Hutton gave at the end, protective of Freddie's dignity, attentive to what Freddie would have cared about. And while doing this, Jim Hutton understood that Freddie was gone. He went to his bedroom. He stopped the carriage clock, 12 minutes to 7. After Freddie Mercury died, Jim Hutton was given 3 months to leave Garden Lodge. He went to Ireland and built a house. In 1994, he published Mercury and Me, the Relationship in the Final Years, told with the same precise honesty as every account he gave. He had one long-term relationship after Freddie with a man who could not bear to hear Freddie Mercury's name. In December 1995, a friend wound up the carriage clock and he heard it ticking. He took it as a sign. He started HIV medication and moved back to Ireland permanently. He died on New Year's Day 2010, 3 days before his 61st birthday, from lung cancer. The last photograph of Freddie Mercury was taken by Jim Hutton in the garden of Garden Lodge on the 28th of August, 1991. Freddie standing with one of his cats, smiling. Jim Hutton. This was the last time Freddie posed for a camera. The last photograph of Freddie Mercury was taken by Jim Hutton. The last real words of Freddie Mercury were heard by Jim Hutton. He was carrying Freddie's ring when he died. He stopped the clock at 12 minutes to 7. He went to Ireland and built a house and died on New Year's Day 2010. The Bohemian Rhapsody film gave him 3 scenes. This is the rest of the story. Freddie Mercury said, "Oh, they're wonderful." He said it at 6 in the morning in a chair in the doorway of a room in a house in Kensington, looking at paintings he had chosen across 20 years, lit by lights he had installed for exactly this purpose a few days before the end of everything. Jim Hutton turned on the lights. He brought the chair. He walked in front on the stairs. He heard the sentence. He has carried it since across 19 years of his own life after Freddie, across Ireland and London and back to Ireland, across everything that came after, right up to New Year's Day 2010, when it stopped being carried and became simply what had been. The paintings are still in the collection. Some of them were auctioned after Freddie Mercury's death and are now in other rooms, lit by other lights, looked at by people who chose them for their own reasons. Some are still with Mary Austin at Garden Lodge. The spotlights are still calibrated for what he wanted them to show. And somewhere in the record of a life, in the testimony Jim Hutton gave before he was gone, in the sentence that has been repeated now across 30 years in every language in which Freddie Mercury's name is said, the 6 o'clock morning is still there. The chair's in the doorway. The lights come on, and he says it again, every time. Oh, they're wonderful.